The villains of One Punch Man are absolutely insane, but in my opinion, these are the 5 most insanest? Yeah, insanest, why not? In the roughly 200 chapters we've gotten from One Punch Man so far, we've seen a massive cast of characters get introduced into the story. Really, this is One's greatest talent with any series he's created. He straight up just knows how to make unique and interesting characters that each play their own role within the story so well. Each villain introduced in the series has a role to play, and they usually deliver in a massive way when they need to. From insane feats of power to very intimate and deep situations that really leave you thinking, the villains of One Punch Man do it all. Well, I was thinking about One Punch Man before bed, as I tend to do, and I got to thinking, man, there's a ton of sick villains in the series, but which ones would be in my top 5? Well, I'll be figuring that out along with you in this video, and honestly, as I was thinking through these, I feel like the last few might come as a bit of a surprise to you, so make sure to stick around to the end and see if your top 5 list matches up with mine or not. So I'm pretty much going to be explaining each villain's origin and abilities, along with why they're in my top 5 to begin with. So yeah, let's get started. First on the list we have the one-eyed space pirate himself, Lord Boros. Now, I'm sure right now you're probably thinking something like, what the F bro, how could Boros be number 5 in any top 5 list? This list is trash already, dog. Well, just chill out, my guy. Other than like the top 2, this list is in no particular order. They're kind of just in the order in which I feel like talking about them. With that being said, Boros is undeniably one of the strongest villains One Punch Man has ever seen, period. Really, before Cosmic Fear Garo made his appearance, Boros held the top spot in terms of strength for a very long time, and for good reason. Boros was the leader of the alien pirate group called the Dark Matter Thieves, and much like Saitama, had a self-imposed existential crisis, having become so powerful that no fight would excite him anymore. He's from an alien planet where the extreme environmental conditions caused his species to evolve, having exceptional regeneration abilities along with enhanced strength and speed. Boros in particular was a prodigy even within his own species, so he stood miles above them as the strongest in the universe. He also of course has the good old classic energy projection abilities. You guys probably already knew all that, but did you know that the Boros you see in the manga and anime is actually not the original design for his character? But first, I had this burning question on my mind that I know I would never get answered, at least truthfully. Who wins in a fight between Boros and Garo? Well, thankfully, Talkie let me find out the fun and lazy way. That's because I went on Talkie and went through their over 100,000 characters of different personalities and voice tones, and found Garo and Boros themselves. You can even make a phone call to your favorite character or create and build your own character anytime. So I went up to each one of them individually and personally asked them who they think is the strongest. First was Boros. Okay, here we go. If you and Garo ever fought, who would win? Garo probably, since I'm so out of my prime and he's one of the strongest. I'd definitely put up a good fight though. He'd need to go all out. Wow, so you're gonna give in that easily, huh? Boros shrugs. I'm an honest man, not afraid to admit when I'm wrong, and I know in my current state I would lose. Wow, okay. Dang, you're pretty based, Boros. Well, Boros was a lot more humble than I thought he would be, but something told me that that wouldn't be the case with Garo. Alright, Dragon Ball Z Garo, let's go. Who would win in a fight, you or Boros? Me, no question about it, I'm the strongest. Alright, even in your human form, especially in my human form. What the heck? How does that make sense? You wouldn't understand, you're weak. What? You don't know that, I'm actually kind of tough. Prove it? Oof, nah, it's my off day, I don't want to get sweaty. Fine, then I'll just assume you're weak. I'm not though. Then why don't you prove me wrong? Oh my god. Because I just ate and I would get a cramp, obviously. So you're scared. I thought you said you're tough. Oh my god. And there we go. We found out that Boros is pretty based, and I could beat up Garo in a fight. Confirmed. I got my answers, and I have Talkie to thank for it. Have tons of fun conversations with your favorite anime characters, or even create your own, by clicking my link in the description and downloading Talkie today. The first version of Boros looked more human-like and had different armor too. The armor in particular looks distinctly different because it's like all black and has a different shape to it. I don't know, it looks kind of weird to me, to be honest. Also, originally Boros had a 4th form that he was going to take in his fight against Saitama, but Murata ended up scrapping it, but we still have this concept sketch to see what could have been. I personally think it looks kind of cool, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Really, there's 2 main reasons why he's one of my favorite villains in the entire series. First off, being the battle manga bro that I am, I of course loved the fight between him and Saitama. To that point in the story, it was the farthest that Saitama had ever been pushed, and Boros' feats of power were a true spectacle in this fight that made for one of the best anime fights fights I've personally ever watched. Other than that though, what I think I love most about Boros' introduction into One Punch Man is that he was the first villain to really show how large scale one really wanted to go with this story. With Boros, we learned that extraterrestrial life was pretty much canon in the series, so that opened the door for major plot points and characters in the series going forward, to not just exist on a planetary but also a universal level, like we've been kind of seeing now with all the Blast and God stuff. Boros was pretty much a hard introduction to how vast of a universe one wanted One Punch Man to be, and I could not be happier that he ended up going this route. Number 4 on the list might come as a bit of a surprise for you, but hopefully by the time I'm done talking about him, you'll see exactly why I threw him in here. The villain in question is pretty much the embodiment of incel energy to the straight up max, Fura Ugly. Now, he's an interesting case to me because his character introduced a new concept to One Punch Man that I think added a cool wrinkle to the power system of the series in general. As we all know, things like extreme negative emotions and environmental factors can cause monster transformations, but Fura Ugly's case is kind of special. When he shows up in front of Amai Mask and pretty much makes him piss his pants out of pure horror from his ugliness, Amai explains that Fura Ugly is likely an Ugmon, which is someone whose monster transformation stemmed from a deep and violent insecurity of their own appearance. Not only is his transformation unique from other monsters, the way he becomes stronger is too. The source of Fura Ugly's power stems from feelings of inferiority and humiliation, so the more humiliated he feels, the stronger he becomes. Dude pretty much has a humiliation fetish, so yeah, do what you want with that information. At first, he's just a super strong meathead that gets bigger and stronger with every L that he takes, and then once he becomes vomited Fura Ugly after being eaten by gums, he essentially becomes a fat ball of acid. What makes me really consider him as one of my favorite villains in the whole series though, is quite simply the unrelenting raw brutality that he brought to the Monster Association arc. I mean, he straight up brutalized Tank Top Master and Amai Mask, to the point that I realized that we might actually see some crazy deaths in this arc. For the most part, One Punch Man is a pretty lighthearted story, so having main characters get brought to near death in such a graphic way was a serious shocker at the time. I'm sure those of you that were reading weekly as we saw Tank Top Master get completely broken into pieces feel the same way as I did. Not to mention that Fura Ugly was responsible for one of the only deaths in the series with the Council of Swordsmen. He just straight up melted them. All in all, Fura Ugly added a sense of uneasiness in every scene that he was in, and it was a much needed aspect to the Monster Association arc. Simply having him in the story added a level of unpredictability and stakes to the arc that I really enjoyed. Now, if you're a regular on my channel, you know that I have a weird obsession with Phoenix Man for some reason, so of course he has to be on this list. Phoenix Man just offers so much to the story, from his sick design and abilities to his really interesting backstory. Before becoming a monster, Phoenix Man was just a regular guy that played a role in a kids TV show called Animal Kingdom. In the show, he played a character called Bird Brain and wore the same costume we see him wear as a monster. In the show, his character was described as being dumb and happy, dying in various ways each episode only to come back like nothing happened by the next one. He's pretty much the One Punch Man equivalent of Kenny from South Park. Eventually, the show was cancelled for having too much dark humor, and Phoenix Man was therefore fired and tossed away. This firing is what kickstarted the negative emotions that began his monster transformation. He soon realized that his costume had fused with his body and could now communicate with him telepathically, turning him into the monster known as Phoenix Man. With his new monster powers, he gained the ability to resurrect himself in a new, more powerful form every time that he dies. Dude's essentially a Saiyan. In his fight against Child Emperor, we saw him gain awesome abilities ranging from different modes that enhance his speed and strength, to even having the ability to resurrect the dead. Not to mention, he pretty much has his own domain expansion with the Phoenix Space. His character was even nerfed later on, so he wasn't so damn broken. That's how you know that Phoenix Man is that guy. On top of all the cool transformations and powers that tickle my smooth battle manga brain, I do think he has a pretty tragic backstory that emphasizes that monster transformations in One Punch Man aren't as simple as, oh, you're a monster, that means you were just born to be evil. You can't help but feel for Phoenix Man and what he went through that led to his transformation. I think anybody could sympathize with having your life's purpose pretty much stepped on and then being thrown away like a piece of trash or something. Thankfully, unlike the last two villains on this list, Phoenix Man came out of his fight alive and seemingly turned a new leaf as a crossing guard for kids, and he seems pretty happy to be doing it, so there's a good chance we haven't seen the last of him. Well, kicking off my top 2, we probably have one of the most insane characters in the series, like just simply as a concept. And that of course is Black S. I don't think I have to go into a ton of detail as to why Black S deserves to be in my top 5, because he's definitely become something of a fan favorite character, and for good reason. He has the ability to reshape his body and make trillions of clones of himself that can act autonomously. He can even combine his clones to create stronger versions of himself like Golden S and Platinum S. His Golden form seems to be best suited for brute force and durability, and his Platinum form has a bigger emphasis on speed. You can honestly make the case that Black S could single-handedly take out most of the S-Class, aside from characters like Tatsumaki and Blast of course. For me, Black S was honestly so much damn fun to have in the Monster Association arc, and he was usually involved in one way or another in some of its best moments. I'm personally not a fan of Atomic Samurai, so it was cool to see him get humbled by Black S. And on top of that, the tsunami attack he did above ground was some peak art from Murata. Most importantly for me though, his Golden and Platinum forms gave me such a nostalgic Dragon Ball Z villain vibe. Like, you could easily drop this character in the Dragon Ball universe and it would make perfect sense. I mean, aside from the fact that he's pretty much sentient sperm, I don't think Toriyama would go for that, but you know what I mean. On top of that, his 3-way fight with Flashy Flash and Garo was absolute peak art from Murata. And of course, who could forget the fact that he helped set up the reveal of King's ultimate move. For that and many other reasons, I am eternally grateful to have this weird little guy in the story. So just before we get to my number 1 favorite villain, I want to bring up a couple honorable mentions that couldn't make it on this list. The first is Deep Sea King. His whole mini arc in the anime is honestly what made me fall in love with One Punch Man to begin with. The episodes looked absolutely amazing. And of course, he allowed my boy Moomin Rider to have a shining hero moment. Honestly, that was probably the only One Punch Man moment that really had me choking up. I think some of you could agree with me. Second, we have Homeless Emperor. I just really love his design and powers. Plus, he perfectly showed how broken God really was, since only a small taste of his power turned a regular dude into a dragon level threat. Lastly, and this was probably the toughest monster to leave out of my top 5 if I'm being honest, we have that monster hot dog that showed up in one of the One Punch Man bonus chapters. Never since the monster hot dog have I seen a more engaging and deep character in the series, so yeah, rest in peace my friend, you are greatly missed. Well, trolling aside, my favorite villain in all of One Punch Man should come as no surprise to anybody, and I'm sure he's at the top of your list too. My number 1 favorite villain in all of One Punch Man is Crablante. Just kidding, it's Garo. From a very young age, Garo was constantly bullied for rooting for the villain in his favorite kids' TV shows, while all the other kids would obviously root for the hero. This caused him to be seen as an outcast and began his resentment for heroes, since his bullies would label him as the villain and themselves as the heroes when they'd be playing outside, giving them an excuse to beat up on Garo. Eventually, he stumbled across Bang's dojo as an aimless and abandoned kid, and was quickly shown to be a fighting prodigy. He became the strongest martial artist at his dojo quickly, but one day he finally snapped and was expelled for beating up everyone in the dojo. This began his journey as the infamous hero hunter, with most of his journey being followed by season 2 of the anime. In pursuing his goal to be the absolute evil, Garo leveled up time and time again to match the strength of his opponents. This allowed him to run the gauntlet of S-Class heroes, including Tank Top Master, Puri Puri Prisoner, and Super Alloy Darkshine, increasing his power every time and drawing closer and closer to his eventual monster transformation. The only stain on his resume really is just getting his ass whooped by Watchdog Man, but that's pretty much it. He also had epic fights with monsters like Royal Ripper, Monster King Orochi, and Overgrown Rover along the way. After his fight with Darkshine, Garo's claims of being a monster finally became a reality. Although a monster, Garo's humanity hadn't fully disappeared as a punch from Bang knocked him to his senses. This led Garo to perform one of the most impressive feats of power the series has ever seen, when he straight up speed blitzed, vomited Fura Ugly, Evil Natural Ocean, and Platinum S. He achieved his perfected technique, the Godslayer Fist, after chopping Sage Centipede right down the middle all the way from frickin' space. In a recent video I made talking about the most massive characters in One Punch Man, I discovered that Sage Centipede is literally like over 90 miles long, so chopping him down the middle is a truly insane feat. He also showed off his unbeatable speed against Flashy Flash and Platinum S, where they had an all-out fight moving long distances across the sky guy in mere fractions of a second. During his fight with Saitama, when he turned into Cosmic Fear Garo, he without question became the strongest villain that we've ever seen in the series, and he'll probably hold that title for a really long time. His fight with Saitama in outer space was iconic, of course, and the end of his character arc was pretty satisfying in my opinion. I've said this a couple times in other videos, but honestly, Garo is one of the only villains I could think of that I was actively rooting for. I mean, you know you've done something right when you create a villain that's so likable like Garo is. Honestly, I don't think One Punch Man would be nearly as good as it is if Garo wasn't included. He pretty much became the main character of the story for a good portion of the Monster Association arc. So yeah, let me know your top 5 villains of One Punch Man in the comments below. I don't really have a cool outro for this video, so have a wonderful morning, afternoon, night, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video. These are the most massive characters in One Punch Man. Well, after going through all the characters I could find heights on, the more accurate thing to say is that these are the most massive monsters in One Punch Man. In terms of size, the bad guys have the heroes beat by a very large margin. For example, the tallest female hero in the series is likely Captain Mizuki, standing well above 6 feet tall, or over 1.8 meters for my international friends out there. The tallest male hero would be Super Alloy Darkshine, standing at 7 feet 8 inches tall, or almost 2.4 meters. And just to give you guys a good idea of just how big the gap is, the smallest monster on this list is more than 4 times that size, and the number 1 monster on this list is more than 1 million times their size. Not even exaggerating. Well, let's kick this list off with some honorable mentions. These are monsters that couldn't make it on this list because technically they aren't canon to the manga, and on that note, I guess I'll quickly give the requirements to who can be on this list officially. First, they need to have appeared in the manga, and that doesn't include bonus chapters, although those are considered canon. I just didn't want to throw bonus chapters in here to kind of confuse things. Also, and this is the more important one honestly, I have to have been able to find at least some decent evidence of their actual height somewhere online. I didn't want to rely on too much estimation and guessing on this list, so if there's a monster you think I missed on this list and you can find some hard evidence confirming their height, then let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. Go ahead. Make us all a little bit smarter. So with that being said, the first of 3 honorable mentions here is the monster Pluton that appears at the end of season 1 of the anime. Pluton was a dragon level monster and self-proclaimed king of the underworld. Pluton has very large and powerful nostrils that he would use to suck in entire buildings into his body, and when he exhaled, he was capable of tearing up large portions of city. It's hard to tell exactly how tall Pluton is, but my guess is that by looking at its size compared to the buildings around it and its massive attack range, I'd put Pluton at over 330 feet tall, or around 100 meters. To give you a real world example of how massive that really is, the Empire State Building is roughly 440 feet tall, so Pluton wouldn't be much shorter than it. Moving on to the next honorable mention, we have a snowman simply known as Giant Snowman. It appears in the bonus chapter 200 yen, as Saitama saves a kid from a much smaller snowman monster, and his size is revealed to be 1,000 meters, or 3,280 feet. This was shown in the official data book. He also appears in a different form in the intro of season 1 as well. It's a lot harder to tell that it's a snowman monster in that one actually. As a good size comparison, the tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa, standing at over 2,700 feet tall, so Giant Snowman is more than 500 feet taller than even this. Well, too bad he would melt instantly if he actually ever stood next to the Burj Khalifa. The final and by far most massive honorable mention here is the incredible psychic monster amalgamation known as Sairochi. This was a form that we saw in the Monster Association arc after Monster King Orochi and Psychos fused, with some potential help from God. I found it really hard to pinpoint a solid size for her, which is why she isn't officially on this list, but considering the pillar her body was standing on in the manga seems to have massive skyscrapers inside of it that pale in comparison to her size, and her attacks were insane enough to literally cut off a large portion of the Earth's crust, she can be estimated to be up to 1,500 meters, or almost 5,000 feet tall. That would be almost twice the size of the Burj Khalifa. With that in mind, it would be completely crazy to think that any monster would be bigger than that, but in reality, she doesn't even crack the top 3 of this list. Crazy, I know, but enough hyping up, let's get started on the official top 10 list. Kicking things off at number 10, we have Carnage Kabuto, specifically while he's in his Carnage mode. Carnage Kabuto was the most powerful mutant created by Dr. Genus during his time with the House of Evolution, with intelligence, strength, and speed that far surpassed any human being. In his Carnage mode, he's a powerful dragon level threat that can go on total rampages for an entire week. In this mode, he stands at almost 28 feet or 8.5 meters tall. That's almost as tall as like 5 Saitamas. At number 9, we have the monster cadre Goketsu. Goketsu was the winner of the very first Super Fight tournament as a human. After being defeated and captured by Monster King Orochi, he was forced to ingest monster cells, which caused him to have the massive humanoid monster form that we saw in the anime. Although he doesn't have any particular special abilities, his monster form allowed him to have immeasurable strength and speed. In his monster form, he stood at 29.5 feet or almost 9 meters tall, narrowly beating out Carnage Kabuto. Hey, future me here. So I noticed after recording this whole video that I missed a monster, a pretty important one actually, and that's Deep Sea King. I didn't realize that he's recorded to be up to 65 feet or 20 meters in his hydrated form. Like, it's just super hard to believe that he's that big. Doesn't look that way in the anime or the manga to me, but that's what's in the wiki, so I'm gonna throw it in here. Let me know if you're as surprised as I am. Oh, also the giant crow that flew into King's apartment is over 160 feet long, but I would literally have nothing to say about it other than the fact that it flew into King's apartment. So yeah, I left that one out too. Anyway, back to me. At number 8, we take a decent sized jump from the previous two in terms of both size and power with Melzargard. Melzargard was one of Boros' top generals, and he had the ability to change the shape of his body to extend and reshape its limbs. This is how he created things like massive hammers with his arms that can be shot out at range, and unfortunately took the arm of my boy E-Iron. He stood at roughly 42.5 feet tall or 13 meters. For a size comparison, this is bigger than a 3-story building. Taking an even bigger step forward compared to the previous few, at number 7 we have Monster King Orochi. Little is known about Orochi's past, but it was revealed during his fight with Garo that he too is a fighting genius that can copy abilities with a single glance. He was viewed as the strongest monster alive at the time. He can also of course create monster cells that can turn any human into a monster. In his base form, he stands at about 88 feet or 27 meters tall, which is already pretty damn big in itself, but after he transforms into his crawfish looking form, he's estimated to be at least 170 feet or 50 meters tall. This is actually taller than the Statue of Liberty if you don't include the pedestal that she stands on, which I think is kind of weird. I always thought the Statue of Liberty was a lot taller than it is, but whatever. At number 6, we have yet another king, but this time it's the Ancient King. The Ancient King awakened after 300 million years of slumber, only to be taken out instantly by a tiny psychic brat named Tatsumaki. Pretty damn embarrassing if you ask me. There's not really much to be said about his abilities. Although he does have energy projection, you can assume he's pretty durable considering he survived for so damn long. He stood at a towering 290 feet or 90 meters tall. That means that he'd be just 20 feet shy of the height of the Big Ben clock tower in London. But again, too bad he's no match for giant meteors from outer space. But to be fair, who is, right? Well, believe it or not, that size is still nothing compared to the top 5 on this list. And just before we get into those, I just want to give a massive shout out to Shamik from my Discord server for suggesting this video idea to me. And if you want to chat with me and other One Punch Man fans, then join my Discord server by clicking the link in my description below. And if you want to be shouted out in every single one of my videos, along with getting exclusive member-only content, then be sure to become a channel member today, as you'd be greatly supporting the channel, and you also get a ton of cool perks and exclusive emojis. But anyway, kicking off the top 5, we have the massive bodybuilding monster himself, Beefcake, also known as Marugori. Marugori was an aspiring bodybuilder that was obsessed with being the biggest and the strongest. He was transformed into Beefcake after drinking a serum created by his mad scientist brother. Now, there's plenty of debate on his size considering the anime took some quite literally big creative freedoms when it came to how big he was depicted in the first episode of the anime. If we're going off his anime size, he could be as goddamn massive as 49,000 feet or 15,000 meters tall, which would be twice the size of Mount Everest. However, his documented manga size is admittedly much smaller but still pretty massive. In the manga, he comes in at 885 feet, or 270 meters tall. This would be nearly twice the size of the Pyramid of Giza. Too bad he wasn't that smart. Well, Beefcake is pretty damn big, but this is still nothing compared to the potential size of number 4 on this list, Evil Natural Ocean. It was created by Psychos during one of her experiments. I think it's sometimes undersold just how crazy of a potential disaster this monster could have been, considering it was taken out way too quickly by Saitama before it could really do much of anything. Do not get it twisted though. Evil Natural Ocean is by far one of the most insanely powerful monsters we've ever seen. In theory, it could have merged with all the oceans on Earth and grown to a size that's larger than all the land on the planet combined. However, in its largest form that we saw in the manga, we saw that just one of its eyeballs was the size of a freaking aircraft carrier. These types of ships could be longer than 1,000 feet or 330 meters, and this guy had 2 of these eyeballs, so just those 2 alone would be over 2,000 feet long. Mind you, this isn't even including the size of its water body, but I mean, it would be pretty damn hard to measure the size of that. So we're going to stick with 2,000 feet for its official size, which I mean is still nothing to sneeze at, especially considering that's over 500 feet larger than the tallest building in the United States, the Sears Tower, or the Willis Tower if you're from anywhere that's not Chicago. I'll honestly never get used to that. Kicking off the top 3, we get into some truly mind-blowing numbers here. I'm talking many times the size of even Evil Natural Ocean. At number 3, we have Elder Centipede. Elder Centipede was a gargantuan centipede monster that was one of the most powerful cadre of the Monster Association. In the anime, the full length of its body was shown to easily hover over an entire city. This would put its full length easily at 5 miles or 8 kilometers long at the minimum. And honestly, I think that's low balling it. This would put him at a minimum of 26,500 feet tall, which is not much smaller than one of the tallest mountains in the world, Mount Everest. What's all that size compared to one serious punch from Saitama though? Not much apparently. The runner-up to the most massive monster in One Punch Man is really similar to Elder Centipede in the fact that it's also a centipede monster, but that's where the comparisons end, because Sage Centipede was on a completely different plane as Elder Centipede, both in terms of raw power and sheer size. Because of its mind-boggling size, it's hard to wrap your head around its estimated length, but one manga panel can actually give us a pretty good idea. During its fight with Garo, it fully stretched out its body straight up through the sky to catch its regeneration core that Garo had torn out. In this absolutely beautiful manga panel drawn by Murata, we see that Sage Centipede's body had reached into outer space before being completely sliced in half. To get from ground level to outer space on Earth, you'd have to travel roughly 62 miles or 100 kilometers straight up in the sky. And it seems that Sage Centipede managed to stretch out even further than that by a very good margin. So that means its length could be as much as 93 miles or 150 freaking kilometers. That comes out to roughly 492,000 feet, meaning you'd have to stack Mount Everest on top of itself almost 17 times to match the full length of Sage Centipede. Well, pick your jaw up off the floor because that's still mere peanuts compared to the biggest monster that currently exists in One Punch Man. At number 1, we have a monster whose raw size and power are quite literally from a completely different dimension compared to any monster on this list. This, of course, is God himself. Very little is known about God other than the fact that it can grant incredible amounts of power to even the weakest life forms, being able to make a regular human like Homeless Emperor into a powerful dragon level threat. It also seems to be fighting some sort of multi-dimensional battle with Blast and his team of collaborators, and was shown during Saitama's fight with Garo to be potentially locked away in the moon. Well, in one of the most stunning panels of the manga that we've ever seen, we see God literally crawl on top of the moon and just simply stared at Homeless Emperor, just as he was about to spill the beans to Zombie Man. In a pretty awesome article that I'll link in the description below, it's calculated that God is roughly 84% of the total diameter of the moon. That means that God's height adds up to an otherworldly 2,921 kilometers, or 1,193 miles tall. That's almost the freaking size of Pluto. I mean, just imagine looking outside your window tonight and seeing a massive humanoid figure standing up on top of the moon and just staring right at you. That shit is nightmare fuel. These are characters in One Punch Man that are so dangerous that they have bounties on their heads, many of which you probably haven't even heard of before. We all know that in One Punch Man, once someone becomes a hero and joins the Hero Association, they get placed in classes C, B, A, or S, depending on their strength, intelligence, and overall popularity. Along with that, we also know that monsters are categorized from wolf to god level threats based on their destructive potential, but there's a rarely touched upon yet very relevant ranking system that was specifically made for notorious villains and criminals as well, and this is completely separate from the disaster level system. This of course is the class bounty ranking system that was likely created for individuals that aren't monsters but still pose a serious threat to society. Therefore, their wanted posters get plastered everywhere with enticing bounties on their heads like they're pirates from One Piece or something. Much like the hero ranking system, bounty criminals are ranked from C to S, essentially ranking them based off of their relative strength compared to heroes. That being considered, in One Punch Man there is a plethora of little known yet really interesting characters scattered throughout the manga in various bonus chapters that vary in strength and notoriety greatly, and I'll be naming them all for you guys today. So just to give you guys a quick understanding of how this ranking system works, for example, an S-class bounty is likely strong enough to defeat any hero that isn't an S-class hero, and could possibly even defeat some S-class heroes as well, and we'll actually be talking about one in particular a little bit later. As a matter of fact, Puri Puri Prisoner should definitely have an S-class bounty on his head, considering he's literally a convicted pervert that breaks out of prison when he wants to fight monsters and creep out surrounding men. It's never been confirmed if the Hero Association is the only organization or group that can place bounties on criminals, so there's a good chance that Puri Puri Prisoner has a heavy price on his head from some rich guy that was unfortunate enough to be saved by him and wants to settle the score. The payouts for defeating class bounty criminals are actually pretty damn nice, as we see in the bonus chapter, Struggles of the Fubuki Group. Here we get this funny little short story where Fubuki is sick of renting shitty cars to ride around in and demands that her underlings gather enough money to buy a sweet Mercedes-Benz or something, because she says that they'll need 5 million yen, which comes out to about $34,000. I mean, not surprising from the Queen of Bougie, right? Well, the Fubuki Group argues that they don't make enough money from the Hero Association to afford a car like that, and Fubuki simply tells them to look for the many flyers that are scattered around the cities and make some more money. They all take this as looking for flyers that offer part-time jobs, and they all slave away for an entire week and manage to gather 3.5 million yen, which is still well short of their 5 million yen goal. This is when Fubuki walks in with a fat wad of roughly 2 million yen to send them over their goal. As they question how Fubuki gathered so much money on her own in such a short amount of time, her wording implies that she did some, lady of the night work to get it all. In reality, when Fubuki told them to look for flyers scattered around the cities, she meant the criminal bounty posters that are pretty much everywhere. The point of me explaining all of this is because Fubuki then points out that she managed to gather almost 2 million yen by defeating 2 B-class criminals and 1 C-class criminal. One of the B-class criminals in question that we'll actually be talking about in a second, when I start naming and explaining all of the class criminals to you, had a bounty of 660,000 yen, or roughly 4,500 US dollars. So using this information, we can get a pretty good idea on how much someone can make from each class bounty. It's likely that B-class bounties can bag someone anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, with C-class bounties going up to about $3,000. Since the power gap from B to A-class heroes is a lot bigger than C to B-class heroes, and even more so when we go from A to S-class heroes, the reward amounts likely scale reflecting that. This means that defeating an A-class bounty can get you anywhere from $8,000 to $50,000, and defeating an S-class bounty could send you into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It kind of makes you wonder why Saitama doesn't take advantage of this more often, considering we've seen him defeat several villains with bounties on their heads, and he just hasn't claimed the money. That's a different conversation though. Well, we've seen roughly 9 total characters in the story that are confirmed to have their own bounties, and we'll be starting with the C-class bounties ranging up to $3,000. To kick off the list, we actually have the One Punch Man equivalent of Al Capone. His name is Don Pacino, and he's the head of the Pacino family. We meet him during the OVA episode, The Pupil Who is an Extremely Poor Talker. A lot of these guys are from OVA episodes actually, so I won't be giving you guys a full breakdown of each episode, but the short and skinny of this one is that Genos and Saitama split up to get ingredients for a hot pot, so Saitama hands Genos his house keys and warns him not to lose them. Heading to one of the supermarkets, Genos runs into a guy from a rival mob family to the Pacino family and finds out that Don Pacino has ransacked all the stores in the area and they were all forced to close. The guy collapses, and as Genos helps him up, he drops Saitama's keys, which Don Pacino finds and then holds as ransom until Genos explains his ties with the rival family. After realizing that he has nothing to do with them, Pacino and his goons unload their guns on Genos, which obviously does nothing, and Genos fries them with his incineration cannon. Don Pacino doesn't seem to be a real threat since his class bounty is so low, and he's just your stereotypical mob boss with goons and guns at his disposal. Nothing too exciting. The next C-class bounty that we have here is serial arsonist Banero, who appears in the bonus chapter A New Wind Blows. He used to be an acrobatic barista, whatever the hell that is, and turned to a life of crime where his weapons of choice are Molotov cocktails that he makes with his insignia on them. Banero's name and emblem are actually references to Bokun Habanero, a brand of Japanese spicy snacks, and its mascot. His face is concealed in a hoodie, which makes him look like a creepy jack-o'-lantern monster, but really he's just a regular guy in his 20s that gets defeated by the Fubuki group easily. Moving on to the B-class bounties, ranging from $4,000 to $7,000, we start off with the aforementioned criminal that Fubuki defeated, Hiyaha Axe. He's one of the only known criminals to have a confirmed bounty number at 660,000 yen, or $4,500 as I said earlier. Besides that, there's really nothing special about him. I mean, he's a big burly guy that carries around a huge-ass axe. That's pretty much all there is to him. However, another B-class criminal that's much more interesting though is men's esthetician man. Holy shit, I did not know it was going to be that hard to pronounce that. Not doing it again. Anyway, this guy appears in the OVA episode, A Shadow That Snuck Up Too Close. It takes place between the time that Genos first meets Saitama against Mosquito Girl and when he actually moves into his house. In this episode, Genos starts stalking Saitama to find out the secret of his crazy strength and ends up stealing a fry off of Saitama's plate when he's eating at a restaurant because he thinks that his diet might be the key. On a side note though, this is when we find out that Saitama's favorite kind of fries are the long and soggy ones, which in my opinion are the worst kind of fries, but let me know if you agree with me in the comments or if you disagree, and subscribe while you're at it, yeah? After Saitama had his french fries stolen from his plate, suspecting he now has a stalker, he runs into this guy, who said he was defeated some time ago by Saitama. His defeat was so shocking that it dried up his skin, and ever since he had been following a strict regimen of training and moisturizing while looking for Saitama to reap his revenge. This led to some confusion with Saitama concluding that this guy was the one that stole the fry off his plate earlier, so Saitama approaches the confused and scared criminal and proceeds to punch him through a building before warning him to never steal french fries ever again. This guy apparently transformed into a monster after Saitama defeated him, which gave him the power to use the cream that he carries to completely dehydrate and mummify innocent people. It's pretty brutal when you think about it actually. Well, our last B-class criminal actually no longer has a bounty on his head after turning his life around. I'm of course referring to Hammerhead, who we should all be pretty familiar with by now. He was a deadbeat criminal that refused to get a job and turned to a life of crime. At some point, he single-handedly hospitalized 20 men, so obviously he has some pretty fierce physical strength. He also has a crazy thick skull that allowed him to survive lethal blows to the head on a few occasions, one from Sonic and the other from the weird organization robot guys. He started the Paradisers group to create a world where people had the option to work, and the people that had jobs would support those that want to sit around and do stuff like, I don't know, watch YouTube videos about One Punch Man all day. Just kidding, I love you guys, don't leave me. Well, aside from his goals and dreams, he stole battle suits from some mysterious organization that gave his goons enough strength to demolish entire buildings on their own. Unfortunately, his movement was cut very short after Sonic beheaded all of his followers instantly.
That's gonna leave a mark.
Oh, great heavens!
and Hammerhead had his suit destroyed by Saitama. Now he's just a guy living with his mom looking for a job. I mean, hey, that sounds like most of my life, to be honest. Now moving on to A-class bounties ranging from $8,000 to $50,000, we start with a criminal that, in Saitama's words, is a total pervert, this being Fish of Darkness from the OVA episode Road to Hero. This is actually my favorite OVA episode because it's pretty heartwarming and it shows us how Saitama got his famous yellow suit. In this episode, Saitama tries to help an old tailor from having a shop taken away by loan sharks, specifically called Nia Nia Loans. They're a criminal group that operates out of a crappy apartment that actually turns out to be the one that Saitama was currently living in at the time. He goes to pay them a visit, and after defeating all of his goons, Saitama confronts the leader. This enrages him and he transforms into a monster called Fish of Darkness, which gives him this neon pink fish head, transforms all of his clothes into BDSM gear for some reason, and gives him a long stretchy whip as a weapon. Oh, and he can also spit a bunch of fish eggs out of his mouth. Super scary, I know. Just the idea of ruining businesses turns this guy on, so it makes sense that his whole monster theme is all around pretty perverted too. Saitama defeats him and tries to hand him over to his landlord to cover all the missed rent that he's built up, but it turns out that the counterfeit operation that they were running in the building was actually the landlord's main source of income, so she angrily kicks Saitama to the curb. This was actually the same apartment that Saitama was pissed to see that it didn't get destroyed during the Meteor episode of the anime. But continuing the trend of silly animal themed criminals, we have Bull Bull, who was the leader of the Cow Stomach gang that appeared in the bonus chapter What Can't Be Bought. Here we see Saitama visiting his bank to find out that he's too broke to even buy a soda that he really wanted to try, and in that moment the bank is suddenly robbed by Bull Bull and his gang of cowbros. He takes a little kid hostage and runs away, but his car gets picked up by Saitama and turned around. Saitama makes quick work of them all obviously and is left with fat bags of cash, but of course, although enticing, he does the right thing and doesn't steal any of the money, even though he's a broke ass bitch. What a guy, right? There's nothing special about Bull Bull other than he's a pretty big dude with above average strength, and he dresses up like a cow even though he named himself after a bull, but what do I know? Next, we pretty much have a carbon copy of Bull Bull with a different theme, this being Big Iron, who was the leader of the Iron Fist gang. He appears in chapter 180 of the manga during the middle of Saitama's cross-country fight with Tatsumaki. Big Iron and his gang hold a woman named Erica hostage, and A-class hero Feather attempts to save her but is beaten down after defeating several members. Before Big Iron can finish him off, Tatsumaki sends Saitama flying through a wall and knocks out Feather. Even though they recognize that Tatsumaki is ranked 2 in the S-class, Big Iron sees this as an opportunity to take her down and boost his reputation. He makes his goons attack Tatsumaki and he attacks Saitama, but they all get blown away instantly. Again, Big Iron's your average big meathead villain, with his weapon of choice being his iron gauntlet. Considering he's the leader of a group that can take down A-class heroes, he's probably strong enough on his own to handle mid-tier A-class heroes. The final criminal on this list is actually the only confirmed S-class bounty currently. If you couldn't guess who it is yet, it's our boy Speed of Sound Sonic. There isn't much to be said about Sonic that you probably don't already know, but here are some little known nuggets about him anyways. The creator of One Punch Man 1 once said himself that if he had his sword, Sonic would be able to easily defeat Deep Sea King in his dehydrated form. Also, Sonic's black lines under his eyes are a reference to American football players and are inspired by Ice Shield 21, another manga by Yusuke Murata. Other than the fact that he's a ninja that can move at supersonic speeds and is a self-proclaimed arch rival of Saitama, most of his backstory and details are actually going to be revealed really soon in the manga. Really excited to see that, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video enough to subscribe and turn those notifications on so you can know as soon as a One Punch Man chapter drops, because I'm always the first guy to cover them. That is it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful day, night, morning, whatever. I've been recording this too long and I'll see you guys later. This is every single dragon level monster in One Punch Man. In the world of One Punch Man, monster appearances are becoming more frequent and much more disastrous with every passing day. Every recorded monster appearance has been categorized since the inception of the Hero Association based on the monster's potential danger to the public. This is called a disaster level. The disaster levels from the Hero Association go as follows: Wolf, Tiger, Demon, Dragon, and God. Just 10 or so years ago, monster appearances appearances occurred only a handful of times per year, and when they did, it would usually be a weak tiger level monster at the very worst. Well, nowadays it seems like dragon level threats are the most common ones and are currently sending the One Punch Man world into complete chaos, which makes sense since dragon level monsters are categorized as being capable of destroying entire cities on their own. Well, the lineup of dragon level monsters that we've seen so far in the series is super diverse and filled with some truly broken characters, some of which you probably haven't even heard of or remember at all. So today I'll be explaining every single disaster level dragon that we've seen in the anime and the manga so far, and also rank them because, like you're about to see, not all dragons are built the same. Kicking off the list, we have the weakest disaster level dragon and honestly a fan favorite of the community, Grorybas. Grorybas is a weird entry in this list because he had a total of like 5 seconds of screen time in the anime and absolutely no feats whatsoever to his name. That being said, he's become a popular meme amongst One Punch Man fans because of this, so in actuality he's probably one of the more well-known monsters on this list. Even though he got smacked around by Saitama before he even got to show off any of his moves, bonus content in the manga actually revealed some of them. On his way to confront Saitama, Grorybas starts listing off some of the moves that he's going to use on him, including the Double Bite, Purgatory Thorn Grip, Sky Strangler Sunder, Screw Tail Thrust, and of course his Acid Breath that he said could melt anything. Well, I guess we're just gonna have to take his word for it because, you know, he's dead. So next up we have Kenzen Rat. Don't have to spend too much time on this one because it had even less screen time than Grorybas did. Kenzen Rat is an enormous rat monster that is capable of impaling entire skyscrapers with one of its many spikes, seemingly without any effort at all. The fact that it got taken out by Tatsumaki as collateral damage during her and Saitama's fight makes this monster seem much weaker than it actually is, and compared to the rest of the monsters on this list, it definitely is. But don't get it twisted, Tatsumaki is the second strongest hero in the entire S-Class, and destroying entire buildings without even trying is nothing to sneeze at. Well, now we move on from a giant rat to a tiny sprout, withered sprout that is. If you're not familiar with One Punch Man bonus chapters, there's probably a good chance that you haven't even heard of withered sprout before. It looks tiny and weak, but it's actually one of the more unique and menacing monsters I've seen in One Punch Man period. In the bonus chapter disaster level, we see withered sprout mislabeled as a wolf because of its tiny size and cowardliness. However, this turns out to be a ruse as it pulls a surprise attack on Smile Man and his brothers and is revealed to be in fact estimated at disaster level dragon. It has some pretty crazy ice conjuration powers that seem to have no limit in terms of how much ice it can generate at once. Seeing as how it's estimated to be dragon, it can likely freeze entire buildings and city blocks in an instant. And what really makes it a tricky monster is its aforementioned weak appearance that can easily fool any hero coming within range of its ice. However, all the ice in the world couldn't save it from an angry Saitama that was steaming after an ice attack from withered sprout made his potato all cold and inedible. I mean, if you mess with Saitama's food, your fate is sealed. Now that we're done talking about sprouts, let's talk about trees for a second. More specifically, the Forest King and his army of forest folk. The Forest King was a large and monstrous looking tree creature standing several stories high, with several thick branches covering his entire body that acted like its limbs. He only saw humans as fertilizer for his goal of returning the greenery to Earth at the cost of human existence. Even though anyone with like a lighter or some gasoline could easily handle his goons, a swift and large area flame explosion from Genos was necessary to take out the Forest King, considering he was several stories tall and can regenerate his lost limbs. But yeah, having fire as a weakness makes it to where he can't go any higher on this list in my opinion, so yeah, moving on. So now we move on from a tree to a rock, shaping up to be a, pretty interesting list so far, isn't it? The rock in question is actually the giant meteor that was gonna fall on Z City until Saitama blasted it to bits. The reason it's higher on this list than actual monsters is for the simple reason that its disaster level was not an estimation of how much destruction it could cause. It was a 100% certainty that it would have completely destroyed multiple cities, and there was literally no one other than Saitama, Blast, or maybe Tatsumaki that could have handled it. In most cases, the list of potential heroes that could defeat a dragon level threat is a little bigger, so for that reason I had to put it above at least a few of the monsters on this list. Getting back to like actual monsters though, we have Bakuzan. Bakuzan was a feared and ruthless martial artist who was likely the strongest fighter in the Super Fight tournament other than Saitama and Suiryu. He was a user of the Dark Hell assassination art fighting style and was the only person to have ever been known to eat multiple monster cells at once and survive. He passed out for a bit but eventually transformed into a giant monster with 4 arms and 3 tails. Goketsu was impressed with his transformation, and his brief rampage on Suiryu showed how potentially destructive he could have been. Coupled with the fact that he still maintained his human intelligence after transforming, made him a serious threat. Too bad for him, Saitama was there, so he didn't really get to do much. For these next 3 monsters, we finally start getting into some of the cadres from the Monster Association arc, and the first one to kick it off is Gums. I mean, Gums is as straightforward of a monster as you can get. He's pretty much a giant stomach with a set of teeth. It can eat anything it sees and was shown to have an even greater appetite than Pig God, who became a top S-class hero primarily for his ability to eat anything, so that in itself says a lot. It was also shown to be pretty durable since Bang turned it into like a straight up bagel in order to save Tank Top Master, and it still managed to continue fighting and eating. It can expand its size and muscles to consume and almost instantly digest anything, but its insatiable hunger wasn't enough to stop Fura Ugly's crazy desire to become as nasty and disgusting as possible. Moving on, we get to none other than Carnage Kabuto. Carnage Kabuto was an artificial mutant created by Dr. Genus and the strongest creation of the House of Evolution. In his base form, he was shown to have genius level intellect, incredible strength and durability, and so much raw physical power that he was able to straight up deflect Genos' incineration cannon just by using his breath. He also seems to have keen animal instincts, since he could tell right away that a single hit from Saitama would kill him instantly, which instinctively made him retreat. His insane endurance was also alluded to when he enters his Carnage mode, which apparently allows him to go on a devastating rampage for almost an entire week without stopping, being capable of devastating multiple cities in the process. In his Carnage mode, all of his base abilities are enhanced tremendously, and it was even explained in a One Punch Man audiobook that he'd be strong enough to go toe-to-toe with rank 11 S-class hero Super Alloy Darkshine for 15 minutes before losing. Unfortunately, his one fatal mistake was picking a fight with Saitama the day that a deal at the supermarket was supposed to end. RIP. So getting back to the cadres, the next one on this list used to be a little fluffy cat, but is now a powerful, still probably pretty fluffy, dragon level threat, Neon. At first, Neon was just a regular house cat whose owner often forced her unwanted love onto him via kissing and hugging. I don't know about you, but that's gonna make me think twice the next time I decide to pick up my cat and give him a little kiss, because I know that my cat hates them. After transforming, Neon gains some seriously powerful abilities that complement his cat theme, and he uses a hit and flee fighting style that definitely reflects his cat-like nature. Cat owners, you know what I'm talking about. For starters, he has such impressive speed and reflexes that he managed to speed blitz multiple A, B, and C class heroes in the blink of an eye, and even stopped a knife by closing his eyelids. He also has a set of retractable claws that are strong enough to create shockwaves whenever he delivers a blow with them, also highlighting super impressive physical strength. Probably his most unique and overall powerful ability though, is being able to contort his body to slip in and out of almost any surface. He stated himself that he could easily slip through any space larger than 3 freaking millimeters, which makes him nearly impossible to restrain. Like any sassy cat though, he easily overestimated his own abilities, which led to his downfall when he tried slipping into Drive Knight's body in order to destroy him from the inside, only to be straight up fried by his superheating ability. Now it's only fitting that just after talking about a cat, we now have to move on to a dog. Probably the goodest boy on this list, to be honest. That is of course Overgrown Rover. Unlike Neon, it isn't clear how Overgrown Rover became a monster, or if it was ever an ordinary dog to begin with. What we do know though is that Rover is one of the most durable monsters we've ever seen in the series, being able to withstand multiple blows from Garo and even a punch from Saitama. This alone would be enough proof to make him a truly powerful dragon level threat, but this isn't even his most impressive attributes. Although not a clever fighter like Neon, Rover makes up for this with raw power, being able to shoot energy blasts from his mouth so powerful that it instantly vaporized demon level monsters and could even cause massive earthquakes. His surprising agility for his size were put on full display when he chased and even overwhelmed Garo during their fight. Thankfully though, Rover didn't meet a grueling fate like many of the other monster cadres did, and he's currently enjoying a life as Saitama's pet. Next up, we have the second of Boros' Dark Matter Thief commanders, Melzargard. Yeah, there we go. Melzargard was a large alien with pale gray skin and blood red eyes. It had the ability to change the shape of its own body to extend and reshape its limbs. This is how he created like these massive hammers with his arms that he can shoot out at range, and unfortunately claimed the arm of our boy E-Iron. He also had multiple heads, each of which was able to separate and form its its own body. Each head had a small marble-sized orb inside of it that allowed the body to regenerate around it. If broken though, the head dies. This was honestly his only weakness because his body was so durable otherwise that it could endure Atomic Samurai's most powerful slashes and regenerate instantly. He was also physically strong enough to fend off multiple S-class heroes at once, like Metal Bat, Bang, Atomic Samurai, and Puri Puri Prisoner. Too bad he had a pretty silly weakness though. Can't put him any higher on this list because of that. Next up, we have the ninja monster duo, Hellfire Flame and Gail Wind. Hellfire and Gail are from the 37th graduating class of the same ninja village that Flashy Flash is from. He and Gail joined the Monster Association sometime in the past to finally live life on their own terms and rule the world, as the ninja village that they were from stripped everyone of their identities. They're also both strong enough to be potential cadres of the Monster Association. After seeing their abilities in their monster forms though, it's pretty obvious that they were already stronger than some of the other cadres. When they transform, their already insane speed and reflexes get raised to a whole new level. So much so that they even went through an entire fight sequence against Flashy Flash as a bridge was falling to the ground, meaning they were traveling at supersonic speeds constantly. Flashy Flash himself even stated that if he didn't get to them first, their speed could have posed a very serious threat to the heroes on the surface. As a good comparison to show just how powerful they are compared to other heroes, in their base human form, they were already stronger than Speed of Sound Sonic, who in his own right was already a match for Genos at the time. This means that in their monster forms, they'd probably be able to hold their own against like half of the S-class. They were taken out by Flashy Flash before they can get out of control though, but were eventually revived during Child Emperor and Phoenix Man's fight. It's pretty weird to think that deep into this list, we actually arrive at a monster that's technically just an ordinary guy with no physical abilities whatsoever. I'm of course talking about Homeless Emperor. He's a special case because he's the first character we've ever seen in the story who received his powers directly from God himself and not a monster cell. This distinction makes a massive difference since Homeless Emperor retained his human body and seemingly gained an endless supply of energy projection power. Before meeting God, he was a depressed average man who was fired from his job and had nothing going for him. This led to him making an attempt on his own life until God intervened and offered him power. These powers allowed him to draw from an endless well of energy in order to shoot highly destructive orbs at will. He was able to shoot them in a linear fashion if he wanted to, wherever he pointed his finger like a spirit gun or something, and make them larger in size, like a spirit bomb. He can even have them rain from the sky in an overwhelming barrage while also using them to block enemies' attacks. I think Homeless Emperor's character was definitely added to the story to show how insanely powerful an average human can become with even just a taste of God's power. Unfortunately, his normal body was a serious weakness as he couldn't shoot his blasts too close to himself without being badly injured, which Zombie Man took advantage of. Just before Homeless Emperor was going to spill the beans on God's power, God confiscated it and pretty much killed him right there and then. Next, we have probably one of the most memorable monster cadre from the Monster Association arc, Fura Ugly. He was a truly unique and powerful character as he was the first one to introduce us to the existence of Ugmon, which are monsters whose transformations were caused because of their incredible ugliness. The rage and humiliation caused from being so unsightly causes them to mutate into a monster, and with Fura Ugly's case, made him stronger and stronger as the arc went on. He's also easily one of the most truly evil monsters, since he was the only one in the arc to have actually like straight up killed people when he turned into his vomited form. Before that though, he was shown to have devastating raw strength that was enough to brutally crush every bone in Tank Top Master's body, and even tear my mask in half. Once he was eaten by gums, he transformed into vomited Fura Ugly, which gave his body an immunity to being cut, and his flesh was highly corrosive to the touch. Just one spitball or punch from him could melt regular human flesh easily, which is exactly what he did to the Council of Swordsmen. In fact, his acid was even strong enough to melt the skin off of Super Alloy Darkshine's body, and his skin is nearly impervious. He seemed to be nearly indestructible, but he's a freaking idiot, so he digested himself on accident after Garo turned him into a donut. So for our next dragon level monster, we actually have to go all the way back to episode 1 of the anime to the Attack on Titan ripoff monster, Marugori, or also known as Beefcake. Marugori was an aspiring bodybuilder that was obsessed with being the biggest and the strongest. He transformed into Beefcake after drinking a serum created by his mad scientist brother. This is easily one of the more massive characters that we've ever seen in the series before, said to be even 10 times the size of Monster King Orochi. His large muscular body means that he obviously has an insane level of physical power, and is even strong enough to wipe out entire city blocks using just the wind pressure created from swinging his arms. In all honesty, to me, this is hands down one of the most impressive feats ever performed by a monster in the series, period. He didn't seem too bright though, because he accidentally killed his own brother by slapping the wrong shoulder when he was trying to kill Saitama. Although he was probably one of the most physically imposing monsters we've ever seen, he had one major weakness that many monsters on this list share, and that's Saitama. There's also an anime-only monster called Pluton that pops up at the very end of season 1, and it pretty much has the same gimmick as Beefcake, which is to be fucking huge, so I'll just go ahead and lump them together here. Our next cadre on this list is none other than Goketsu, who was the first ever winner of the Super Fight tournament as a human. This feat alone makes his strength on par or even higher than Suiryu, who is already S-class level, and that was just as a human. After being defeated and captured by monsters, he ended up ingesting monster cells, which caused him to become this massive humanoid monster that we saw in season 2 of the anime. Although he doesn't have any particular special abilities, his monster form allowed him to have immeasurable strength and speed. In fact, even with his massive building-sized body, he was still able to overwhelm Genos with speed and power. Being able to move that fast at the size that he is something that hadn't been seen before to that point. Along with that, he's able to take full advantage of his insane speed and size due to the fact that he still retained his sharp intellect and elite fighting ability. If it weren't for Saitama, I think all heroes not named Tatsumaki or Blast would have had a very hard time dealing with his out-of-world combination of size, speed, durability, and battle IQ. So at this point, we'll be talking about one more monster before we get to what I think is the absolute upper echelon of monsters, some of which you can even consider bordering god level threats. The final monster to close out this tier though is none other than the strongest commander of the Dark Matter Thieves, the octopus looking alien. Anyways, he was Boros' highest ranking officer, and for good reason. Although only shown off for a short time, he has some of the most impressive telekinetic abilities we've seen in the series ever. His psychokinesis can actually eliminate the friction between objects and air, which allows the rubble that he flings to fly at sub-light speeds. Normally they would just evaporate. Aside from this important detail, he was able to manipulate gravity as well. But again, he had one major weakness, Saitama. Alright, so from here on, we finally start dipping into what I consider is the next tier of super powerful dragon level threats. And like I said earlier, some of them are honestly much closer to god level than they are demon. The first of these is actually a grouping of two monsters, Elder Centipede and Sage Centipede. Sage Centipede is of course the larger of the two and much more powerful, but pretty much has the exact same abilities as Elder Centipede, so honestly I just didn't feel like explaining them separately. Watch season 2 if you want to know about Elder Centipede so bad. Sage Centipede is by far the largest monster that we've ever witnessed in the series, and it's not even close. Fully stretched out, it was shown to even reach the stratosphere of the earth, giving its 6,666 arms a pretty damn good reach in a fight. As with Elder Centipede, Sage can regenerate from almost any attack so long as his core stays intact. I think this minor weakness is what truly sets Sage Centipede apart from the monsters below him, because weighing that against how dense and durable his outer shell is, there's really only a handful of characters in the entire story that could come even close to defeating him. The reason that Sage is considered in the realm of approaching god level is due to its raw destructive potential. In mere minutes, it could level entire cities at once, and possibly the entire planet if left unchecked. So as we move deeper and deeper into the absolute strongest dragon level threats on this list, the order of these monsters is going to be more and more controversial, especially for you power scalers out there. So drop your top list in the comments below if you disagree with mine. And hey, you know, maybe subscribe while you're at it, who knows? Get a little crazy. Really, this whole tier minus like the top 3, you can make a case for being higher or lower than they are. The next monster here is probably the most tricky to kill, since it's essentially just a sentient body of water. It has many forms, but today I'll be talking about it in its most powerful form, called Evil Ocean Water. It was created by Psychos on accident during one of her experiments. I think it's sometimes undersold just how crazy of a potential disaster this monster was, since it was taken out way too quickly by Saitama before it could really do anything. Don't get it twisted though, Evil Ocean Water is by far one of the most insanely powerful monsters we've ever seen. In theory, if it managed to merge with all of the Earth's oceans, it could have grown to a size that's larger than all of the land on the planet combined. Even in the form we witnessed in the manga, just his eyes were shown to be the size of aircraft carriers. And I didn't bother to look how big an aircraft carrier was, but I'm sure it's pretty goddamn big. Along with this, it can absorb any liquid it comes into contact with, so if it consumes enough oily materials, it could become almost impossible to freeze, which would be one of its bigger weaknesses. It also has some pretty wild reaction speed because it could sense Garo's hostility, which is how it perceives things and responds to them. It shot massive jet streams at the hero hunter in a span of 0.1 seconds. Its most powerful attack was the Ocean Grand Cannon, which shot thousands of gallons of water in a focused stream, which could even tear up solid ground. Even though it would be borderline unstoppable and an arguable god level threat if merged with all the oceans in the world, I don't want to rank too much on potential, and considering water can be frozen or evaporated, much more intelligent monsters that are above Evil Ocean Water on this list seem to have a much higher ceiling. Okay, so even though I literally just said I didn't want raw potential influencing the monsters on this list too much, I'm gonna look like a big ass hypocrite talking about this next monster. And honestly, I don't give a shit because I think Phoenix Man is by far one of the best and most underrated characters in all of One Punch Man. As a human, he was a part of a kids TV show where he played a character called Birdbrain and wore a giant bird costume. After being fired from the show, Phoenix Man grew depressed and resentful while never taking off his costume. This led to him fusing with his costume as part of his monster transformation and gained the ability to resurrect himself every time he dies and becomes more and more powerful every time he does so. He was quickly killed by Child Emperor in their first encounter, but then quickly resurrected into a humanoid bird form with some insane dragon level strength. If constant resurrection and growth wasn't broken enough, he has a whole grab bag of broken abilities that make him truly worthy of being one of the strongest characters in the series. First off, after his resurrection, Phoenix Man gained the ability to reanimate corpses. This ability affected all dead beings in the area, even if Phoenix Man was unaware of them. So in theory, he could resurrect a dead Orochi and make him one of his own zombies. Along with this, he has various bird forms like Penguin and Falcon mode that allow him to gain additional abilities on top of the ones he already has. This includes super speed, fire manipulation, ice manipulation, and enhanced physical strength. Lastly, dude can straight up create a domain expansion where he's capable of entering another dimension. This dimension is inside of his costume where he can mentally communicate with other costume wearing persons. He dubs this place the Phoenix Space, which is a strong reflection of his own psyche. The reason I have him on this list above other super strong dragons is because in theory he could become endlessly more powerful every time he's killed. His one weakness is removing his costume from his body, which takes away his powers, but most of the dragon level monsters below him on this list don't have the intelligence to figure this out and therefore wouldn't have the wherewithal to take him on one-on-one. It took a genius like Child Emperor to figure it out, and seeing as how Phoenix Man is highly intelligent himself, he wouldn't be easily tricked. Sure, he might be a little high on this list just based on his feats, but his insanely high potential makes him worthy of being here in my opinion, and this is my list, so you know, I can do what I want. Kicking off the top 5 dragon level monsters, we have Vaccine Man. He was a monster that is said to have been born from the will of the earth itself to rid the planet of humans. If you forgot who this even is, I don't blame you because he only appeared at the very beginning of the first episode of the anime for a total of like 5 minutes, not even. In those few minutes though, he proved to be one of the most devastating monsters to ever appear in the series. In mere moments, he was able to destroy large portions of cities and did so seemingly without any effort, with his energy projection that's similar to Homeless Emperor. He also has incredible speed and reflexes since he's able to jump higher than skyscrapers to dish out his attacks. This is all before he transforms into his beefed up form, so it's likely that he was much stronger than he even showed. The reason he's this high on this list is because the dude is straight up a Dragon Ball Z level final boss and likely has endless reserves of energy projection like Homeless Emperor. This is because it was stated by Murata himself that their energy abilities are essentially the same. Had Saitama not shown up when he did, I have no doubt that you could probably count on one hand how many other characters in the series would be strong enough to take him out. Next up, we have another one of my personal favorite characters, and honestly a fan favorite for everybody. He's also one of the most inappropriately named monsters so far, and for some reason, if you haven't guessed who I'm talking about yet, it's Black S, or Black Sperm if you're feeling spicy. Black S has by far one of the most overpowered abilities in the entire series, especially with how versatile it can be. At full strength, he has the potential to split into 54 trillion different clones of himself. This alone could defeat almost any opponent with incredibly overwhelming numbers. This move actually has a specific name. It's called the Sperm Tsunami, and it can level entire sections of cities instantly. He can also manipulate his cells to create large, powerful limbs and regenerate from almost any damage that he takes. If he faces an especially strong opponent, he can fuse with his trillions of cells to create several singular forms. The first of which is Golden-S, where his cells compress so much that his outer body takes on the properties of gold, which makes him impervious to acids and most other attacks. He gains this big, bulky form, which gives him enhanced strength and still lets him retain his high level of intelligence while still having trillions of autonomous copies to control. His second form is called Platinum-S, where he takes on a much slimmer form compared to his bodybuilder type physique with Golden-S and gains a shiny platinum outer body. This form allows him to move at unheard of speeds, exceeding even Flashy Flash. He was able to handle a triple threat match between Flashy Flash and Garo while they were moving large distances across the sky in fractions of a second. In fact, after Flashy Flash was taken out, he hung around for quite a while against Monster Fight Garo. In this form, he gains like a Majin Buu-like tendril on his head that can knock out several S-class heroes instantly. Because of how impressively versatile his ability is and how difficult it makes him to kill, the added bonus of being a highly intelligent monster makes him a truly terrifying force to be reckoned with. Being the clever monster that he is, he's now hiding out as Saitama's pet. So entering the top 3, we actually have a combination of 2 dragon level threats, Psychos and Orochi. On their own, they wouldn't be this high on this list, but once they merged and possibly received some of God's power low-key, they became the towering disaster known as Sairochi by fans. Before I get into their Sairochi form though, I want to dive a little deep into their individual forms first. Psychos is a powerful Esper who was once a close friend of Fubuki. She's capable of performing traditional Esper abilities like telekinesis, gravity manipulation, telepathy, and can also shoot massive energy beams from her eyes. At a young age, she was obsessed with advancing Esper powers, which led her to research the existence of the third eye, which is an ability that an Esper can awaken that allows them to see into the future. One night when she was trying to sleep, she suffered from agonizing headaches before suddenly unlocking the third eye ability. After this, she saw something so terrifying and life-altering that she ended up going borderline insane and made it her life's mission to eliminate the human race completely. After being rejected by Fubuki and their psychic club for her extreme plans, she formed the Monster Association and assumed a body double called Giro Giro. During her time in the Monster Association, she experimented on various life forms with the goal of creating the most powerful monsters possible. At some point, she accidentally created evil natural water during one of her many experiments, and along the way, she also discovered Monster King Orochi when he was still a human. She saw great potential in him and put him through the grueling process of experiencing near death over and over again. This made him stronger and stronger each time. Soon enough, he became what we would eventually see in the anime and the manga. Little is known about Orochi's past, but it was revealed that during his fight with Garo, he too was a fighting genius that could copy abilities with a single glance. He was viewed as the strongest monster alive by Goketsu and Psychos, and even made Metal Knight admit that he would rather not cross paths with him. His towering body has a surprising level of speed and reflexes, as he was able to use his extendable horns to straight up impale Metal Knight's robot before he could even self-destruct. His body appears to be made of intertwined dragons that each can shoot massive blasts of energy and even individually use fighting styles, like when they all overwhelmed Garo at once with his own fighting technique. In his true form, he resembles some kind of crawfish demon, and during his fight with Saitama was even able to siphon off energy from the Earth's freaking core itself. This allowed him to perform the Gaia Cannon. After being taken out by the serious squirt gun from Saitama, he took on this gelatinous blob form that tried absorbing everything around it. This eventually led him to find Psychos as she was being overwhelmed by Tatsumaki's superior Esper powers. In that moment, he attempted to absorb Psychos, but she managed to retain her own consciousness, and with some implied help from God, they became the behemoth that was known as Sairochi. In this new massive form, they coexisted inside the same body and grew to a size more massive than any skyscraper by a very large margin. This new form allowed them to have a humanoid Psychos body at the top, but also a more Orochi-like lower half with the same energy blasting dragons that he had on his old body. The energy beam that Sairochi could produce was enough to completely separate a very large portion of the Earth's crust. Like, looking at this panel, it looks like a whole freaking continent could fit on it. Not only did they have a massive form that towered above ground, Sairochi was also like a tree in the sense that it was able to spread roots throughout the ground, and these roots could absorb anything wherever they spread. This led them to pursue the ultimate goal of assimilating the entire planet with their roots and become a single consciousness, along with dramatically increasing their psychic abilities to a much higher level than Psychos ever could alone. They could also transform into random things like a fighter jet if they feel like it. You know, since I first read the manga, I always thought it was kind of weird and convoluted that they could do something like that, but you know, whatever. Most people just focus on the fact that Sairochi was essentially a 1,000-foot tall waifu. I mean, imagine seeing that staring out the window in the morning. They were defeated with a collective effort from many S-class heroes, and seeing as how Orochi is officially dead, I don't see this form popping up ever again. Psychos is currently somewhere hiding out with Fubuki, so it's yet to be seen exactly what role she has in the manga going forward. So now we move on to the two absolute strongest dragon level threats that we've ever seen in the series before, both of which are capable of vaporizing the entire planet and are arguably even strong enough to be considered god level. The first of which held the mantle of being the strongest villain to ever be in One Punch Man for damn near the entire series. I'm of course referring to the space pirate himself, Lord Boros. Boros was a leader of the Dark Matter Thieves, a group of alien invaders with some of their commanders actually being on this list. It's been a long video, so you know, it's okay if you don't remember. Like Saitama, Boros faced a self-imposed existential crisis, having become so powerful that no battle thrilled him anymore. His travels across the entire universe in search of a worthy opponent eventually led him to Earth, where he faced off against our favorite bald superhero at the end of season 1 of the anime. According to Boros, his species developed the greatest regenerative ability in the entire universe in order to adapt to the harsh living conditions of his home planet. Boros was gifted with superpowers from birth. He claimed that he in particular possessed regeneration, physical prowess, and latent energy that far surpassed all other members of his race. Boros also appeared to be able to sense people's energy, which manifested itself as an aura around said person. He was the very first on-screen opponent that survived a normal punch from Saitama. Destroying his armor actually unlocks Boros' latent abilities and introduced his second insanely powerful form. During the beginning of his fight with Saitama, he was able to knock him through several pillars of his ship with only a single punch. He was also capable of busting through the outer hull of his own spaceship, the same hull that was durable enough to even withstand the immense impact caused by Saitama leaping on it all the way from the moon. And this jump created a massive crater on the moon itself. How's that for power scaling? All in all, Boros was shown to be amazingly resilient. Even after receiving several consecutive normal punches from Saitama, he was completely blown to bits but still was able to reform his body. He used his latent energy as a form of propulsion, making him incredibly fast. While battling inside the giant spaceship, Boros and Saitama were moving so fast that the normal human eye wouldn't be able to follow their movements. I mean, just watching the scene in the anime where Boros is just punching and throwing Saitama all over the place is the best example of how undeniably fast he was. Boros could also use his latent energy that his body produces to shoot off massive energy blasts from the eye in his chest. These energy attacks have a huge area of effect, and by combining his energy projection into a single attack, just the shockwaves from these blasts were capable of destroying city-sized areas. His physical strength doesn't need any more explaining in my opinion. I mean, the dude straight up kicked Saitama to the fucking moon. I mean, come on. What else is there to say? What sets him apart from any other monster on this list though is his otherworldly regeneration and the potential to destroy the entire planet with a single attack. This attack of course being the collapsing star roaring cannon. It took a serious punch from Saitama to finally put Boros down for good, and after this fight it would be another 130 freaking chapters until we finally witnessed another villain that could rival his strength, and that's gonna be our number one strongest ever dragon level threat. We finally made it, guys. The absolute ultimate 100% money back guaranteed strongest dragon level threat this series has ever seen. Crablante. I'm just kidding, it's Garo. Sorry for wasting 30 seconds of your life on that gag, but I just couldn't help myself. Most of you are probably wondering right now, wait, doesn't your thumbnail specifically imply that Cosmic Fear Garo is not the strongest dragon in the series? Well, yeah, and technically I wasn't lying though. I firmly believe that Cosmic Fear Garo undoubtedly became a god level threat by the end of his fight with Saitama, and you cannot change my mind on that. Even before leveling up by copying Saitama with the Saitama mode, Garo was already capable of going blow for blow with #1 hero Blast, and even overwhelmed him at certain points. Just his mere presence caused the Earth to slowly become too radioactive for life to exist due to his cosmic energy. He straight up killed the entire S-Class just by standing there. So in his totally epic fight with Saitama on Jupiter's moon Io, as he was adapting and continuously leveling up to adapt to Saitama's infinite strength, he easily reached a level that far surpasses any dragon level threat a million times over. The dude was literally able to use gamma ray burst and manipulate space and time at will. I mean, come on. So a much more fair placement on this list is actually monsterized Garo and not Cosmic Fear mode. From a very young age, Garo was constantly bullied. A part of this was because he would root for the villain of his favorite kid's TV show, while the other kids would obviously root for the hero. This caused him to be seen as an outcast and began his resentment towards heroes, since his bullies would label him as the villain and label themselves as heroes when they'd be playing around, giving them an excuse to beat on Garo. Eventually he stumbled across Bang's dojo as an aimless and abandoned kid. Eventually he quickly proved himself to be a fighting prodigy. He became the strongest martial artist at his dojo, but one day he finally snapped and was expelled for beating up his entire dojo class. This began his journey as the infamous hero hunter, with most of his journey being followed by season 2 of the anime. In pursuing his goal to be the absolute evil, Garo leveled up time and time again to match the strength of his opponents. This allowed him to run the gauntlet of S-Class heroes, including Tank Top Master, Puri Puri Prisoner, and Super Alloy Darkshine, increasing his power every time and drawing him closer and closer to his eventual monster transformation. I mean, he also did get wrecked by Watchdog Man at some point in between all that, but you know, we're not going to talk about that here. He also had epic fights with monsters like Royal Ripper, Monster King Orochi, and Overgrown Rover along the way. After his fight with Darkshine though, Garo's claims of being a monster finally became a reality, as he transformed underground and climbed to the surface as a mindless beast. He then went on to defeat Bomb, and even proved to be too much for his own master Bang. Although a monster, Garo's humanity hadn't fully disappeared, as a punch from Bang knocked him to his senses. This led Garo to perform one of the most impressive feats of the entire series after he speed blitzes vomited Fura Ugly, Evil Natural Ocean, Platinum S, and Sage Centipede, like 4 of the most insanely powerful dragon level threats that we've ever seen, just quickly getting slapped around by Garo. He achieved his perfected technique, the Godslayer Fist, after chopping Sage Centipede right down the middle all the way from space. He also showed off his unbeatable speed against Flashy Flash and Platinum S, where they had an all-out fight where they delivered multiple blows to each other in fractions of a second, and with that he managed to put both of them down with relative ease. And it wasn't until his fight with Saitama that he started leveling up to a point where he actually rivaled the power of Boros. As he continued to transform deeper and deeper into a monster, he eventually took on a gargoyle-like form mid-fight against Saitama. In this new form, he gained the ability to fly, gained a second set of arms, and also gained energy projection abilities. He combined all of these things to shoot Saitama so hard into the earth that it straight up bulged the other side of the planet. Just the impact from his blow deformed the entire planet Earth through the crust. Pretty damn impressive. He also showed off his innate hero abilities by saving various crowds of people unintentionally as he was attacking Saitama. Although his powers weren't as flashy as Boros's, he makes up for this with raw strength and battle IQ. The creator of One Punch Man 1 even pointed out himself that in a one-on-one fight with Boros, he'd have the upper hand in close combat. Mind you, this was all before Cosmic Fear Garo was even a concept. Couple this with his iron will and godlike ability to adapt adapt and match his opponent with every fight, this gives me absolutely no doubt that Garo would be able to handle Boros even without reaching his Cosmic Fear mode. So there's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you liked it. Let me know what you thought in the comments. I originally was going to have like a nice little outro for this entire long video, but I just spent hours recording this, so I'm just going to, say goodbye. See you guys later.